see it there.
Okay.
Thank you, Kim. Well, thanks, Sid, for that wonderful introduction. I'm going to go first, and Jennifer's going to kind of keep an eye on the chat so that if there are questions throughout, she can stop me and I can answer those. First, I'd just like to thank everyone, Sid, the whole staff at the Cary Center, the college, and Auburn University for putting together the summit. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be on the virtual campus here today. And it's amazing to be teamed up with my colleague, Jennifer Shawa. And we're hopefully going to give you some new tools for your development toolbox. As Sid said, I am the CEO of the United Way of the Chattahoochee Valley. And as an organization, we have a 70-year history of working with corporations, nonprofits, and our clients in the Chattahoochee Valley. We serve an 8-county area, 7 counties in Georgia, as well as Russell County, Alabama. And we have 19 employees. We're located over in Columbus on 5th Avenue. We have a 27-member board of directors that represent leaders from across our community. And we raise just around $7 million a year. Last year was a little bit more than that, but our goal for our fundraising campaign this campaign season is $7 million. And we work with corporate partners, health systems, school systems, and governments, the Community Foundation, as well as technology partners. I see Kermit Farmer on here today, and the leader at Village Creed, and we're very excited to be partnering with Village Creed and some very exciting work that's upcoming in our community. So we have a wide reach across the community and work with literally hundreds of organizational and thousands of individual partners on an annual basis. So today I have 3 topics that I'd like to cover in just under 20 minutes to leave plenty of time for the fabulous Jennifer Shawa and all of your questions. So the first that I'm going to go into is coronavirus response and disaster response. And then community-based product development and major gifts and planned giving. So doing those in under 20 minutes is going to be a challenge, but I'm going to stick to my time and try to push through and not spend too much time lingering on one subject. So in February, early March of this year, we're clipping right along. We just wrapped up the most successful campaign in our 70-year history, and we had secured 2 large grants, a $500,000 grant and a $270,000 grant, one from a totally new donor to our organization to launch 2 strategies in the community. And so 7 months into my new position, I'm feeling really good about things. I'm looking forward to a 6-month planning process, some really deep strategic planning, board engagement, donor engagement, creating buy-in on our new direction items, all these things. And then, whoa, hold on, COVID. And like nothing we've ever seen before, the entire conversation and focus shifted. And so what do you do in that situation? You use adaptive leadership and the ability to be nimble, as we have, being small nonprofits, most of us, and pivot quickly to create value in the community based on the current events and the things that you do well at your organization. So much like when a weather or environmental event occurs, business as usual would be totally counterproductive and tone deaf. But you do need to lead and you need to return value to the community. So I think the best way to do that is to look for partners or a partner to expand your reach, increase your credibility, and leverage your resources. And fortunately for our United Way and our community, we have an amazing community foundation, and we had already partnered with them on tornado relief in the wake of what happened in 2019 in Lee County, Alabama, and in Talbot County, Georgia, as well as previous natural disasters. So we already had that connection. And because of that connection and a history of partnership, and I believe some intentional focus we had placed on that relationship in the first, over that last 7 months and beyond that, one of the first calls I received was from Betsy Covington, who's a longtime CEO of the Community Foundation of the Chattahoochee Valley. She said, hey, we're standing up a coronavirus response fund. We'd like to partner with you. And before she even finished her sentence, the answer was yes. Of course, we would partner and we would create a coronavirus response fund that would live at the Community Foundation, but would be a total partnership between our organizations. And we also knew that we would need to partner across the community in new and different ways to address the unprecedented nature of what turned out to be a 100-year pandemic. So to drive that process, we started daily, Monday through Friday, community calls for the entire community with the specific purpose of elevating the work of the fund and creating open partnerships within the community. We also made the decision to suspend fees, which was key and is a great messaging point, but also the right thing to do. Because in times of crisis, 100% of donor funds need to go to those affected, and you need to be able to tell that to your donors and to the organizations that you're funding. So what were the elements of our coronavirus and crisis response? We had existing strong relationships, so you need to be intentional about creating those and developing those if you don't already have them. We agreed to partner quickly and to work out the details as we went along. If we had waited and spent time planning and been, overly detail oriented up front, it may have dampened the momentum. And so we were up and running with the fund within 3 to 4 days, and we had our first community call scheduled within a week. So we were able to focus our base of support on the fund very early on and get out ahead of a lot of the noise and distraction that would have come if we had waited too long and engaged in kind of a planning process. We were also very flexible. We started out thinking that we would only grant funds to local nonprofits, but we had an opportunity within the first month to partner with a foundation in the area, as well as a for-profit health system, to increase the ICU bed capacity in our community, which we knew was an extremely valuable resource to provide for the community in the early, most deadly days of COVID, when the disease was not understood well and when our hospitals were really taxed at a level that they had not been in perhaps ever. So we were flexible, and we moved to make that partnership work and brought in a large gift to fund that ICU expansion. And we got fast results too. So that was helpful in our messaging. We were able to raise a lot of money quickly. The fund to date has raised over $1.8 million and distributed $1.1 million back to the community. Healthcare has been our #1 impact area, followed by food insecurity, utility assistance, housing, youth services, and we've made over 70 grants. So I believe at this point, over 40 agencies and maybe up to 50 agencies at this point. We have a committee, we meet weekly, and we grant the money out very quickly. And all of that's been very key, and I think is key overall in COVID response as well as disaster response. You have to move quickly and trust your partners to get things done in a short amount of time, because folks need the help at that time. This is not a time to be overly strategic. This is a time to be tactical and to move money into places that can make the most impact. And we share responsibility and credit. We share staff resources. We give credit to both organizations as well as all partners, and that's been a big positive for us, and something that I would recommend using in all of your crisis and disaster response. So you might ask, WIFM, what's in it for me? You're not taking any fees. What do you do? You're doing an extraordinary amount of work. You're using your staff time, your organizational resources. You're perhaps even cannibalizing some of your direct fundraising efforts back to your organization to fundraise for a fund where you're not taking any fees and you're not funding the work that you already have or any of your own operations. So why do you do this? You're doing it because it's the right thing to do, and doing the right thing makes your organization an essential part of the fabric of your community. And in times of crisis, you need to show that outsized value, bolster your position in the community as an essential organization, and really become a part of that fabric, step up to the plate, and that will benefit you in ways that no amount of marketing can buy, that no amount of social media can create. It adds value to your existing programming across the board, and it creates a deep and meaningful brand enhancing experience at the community level that's visceral for your grantees, your partners, and those served. So as far as disaster response for your organization, I think that most of you would probably have a role to play there. in deepening and enriching fundamental and transformational partnerships across your community, and ultimately the lives of those that you're serving, lives that you're saving, lives that you're changing. So I could really talk for much longer about this, but I'm going to move on to product development, which I believe in as a great strategy for how to conduct work in community. So increasingly, community-based organizations need to be highly specific in their development efforts through the creation of community-based products. This has been something I've been focused on really since I started nonprofit work. When I came into the United Way system over 8 years ago, I was surprised at kind of the general nature of the sales messaging and some of what I perceived as kind of a lack of strategic alignment for the direct benefit of United Way fundraising, United Way impact, messaging, storytelling. It was all about the partner agencies that we were partnered with. And don't get me wrong, we have amazing partner agencies and that do amazing work, and we're incredibly proud to fund that work on an annual basis. But in this digital age where you can give to any charity across the world with a click of a button, man, you really have to have something to sell if you're going to engage new donors, increase and diversify your revenue streams, and create deeper, more lasting impact in the community. And in nonprofit, from my perspective, that is done through creating community-based products. So what's a community-based product? It's really anything that serves a need in your community, that's attractive to your donors and to new donors, and that you can execute on. You have to have all three of those things. There may be a need, but if nobody wants to fund it, or if your donors don't want to fund it, or don't think it's in the wheelhouse of your organization, it's probably not the right product for you. And then, of course, there has to be a need. You have to have interest. But if you're there has to be a need there. So, but if your organization, okay, so you have to be able to sell to your donors, you have to have a need in the community that's quantifiable, and you also have to be able to execute, because if you can't execute on what you've sold to your donors to address this need in the community, you're going to be in a lot of trouble down the road. So those three things are what you have to have. You have to have a need, you have to have a product that addresses the need, and you have to be able to execute on what's promised when you go out to sell that product. So if the answer to all three of those things is yes, there's a need, you can fund it, and you can execute, then that is a community-based product that is perfect for your organization. So how do you do that assessment? You use data. You use qualitative and quantitative data. You have to hit the heart and the head in order to make it work. So it has to be something that donors feel an emotional connection to, but also is quantifiable, and you can move the needle on so that you can show value back to them at the end of the day. Language is very important, and the more you talk about giving as an investment, I think the better. With community-based, especially with community-based products, the donors you're engaging are being engaged as investors. They need detail and assurance that your product is a long-term strategy for change. Philanthropists have reached a level in their journey where they're considering their footprint and, what's going to be more appealing to them, something that takes care of an immediate need at the time that maybe lasts for a month or two, or something that's going to create lasting change in the community. And I would argue, certainly in the context of product development, you need to be able to show a lasting strategic change over a course of years that you're going to be able to accomplish. Sophisticated investors deserve sophisticated products. So as an example, at our United Way, we have been talking, and at United Ways across the country, we've been talking about education, income, health, and basic needs for a very long time, for decades. And for the last 15 or 20 years, many United Ways have moved to a collective impact model where they focus on their community on 1 to 3 big goals, say reducing poverty by X amount, and then they'll target all of their grant making and programming around those goals. Product development has lagged a bit. Universities do an amazing job of it. An example, you want to start an engineering school or a medical school. You engage donors around buildings, equipment, faculty recruitment, et cetera. You want to attract better football recruits. So you renovate a stadium and add facilities. And you go to seek donors that want to fund those things. You I want to diversify your student body, creating new perspectives and enriching campus life so you market scholarships. And all of those are products that can be packaged and sold to donors. But in the United Way space and community-based organization space, it's been very, much more general for a long time, especially with the United Way. And so in order to appeal to a major donor, you have to have a specific product. So what our specific product, or one of our specific products at our United Way, is something I brought from Asheville with me called the Community School Strategy. And so why is it a great product? It's a great product for a lot of reasons. It has a national reach. It's a national strategy. There are 35 United Ways already leading the strategy. And United Way is a perfect organization to lead the strategy because we work with so many different types of partners, corporate partners, foundation partners, system level partners, as well as our nonprofit partners. And it's a big strategy with a big focus on reducing the impacts of poverty on students and families within the school setting. And so all of these things make it easier to sell. There's also federal funding that's backing the community school strategy. And so that's on the table. If we can get the strategy off the ground and running well, then we're in the running for potentially millions of dollars of federal grant funding, as well as some state grant funding, as well as national foundation funding that would not otherwise come back to our community. So also a selling point when you're going out to talk to your board, when you're going out to talk to donors, of why this product is right for our organization specifically, but you can apply these things to all products and your specific organization. So elements of the strategy have changed a little bit. The main thing is we're going to put United Way employees into public schools and use those employees to coordinate pipeline services, that's a federal term, at the school level. And then there are some other strategy elements of the strategy, couple of which have been kind of knocked off the top priority line by COVID. But we're going to focus on personnel. We've hired a director for the strategy because it's regional, it's national. It needs to have somebody focused on strategy at all times. So we've hired a director through the grant funding we've received. And then we're also going to implement something called hubs of service grants for our partners in order to bring partners to the table to do this meaningful, deep work within schools and within community. So I had an experience with the strategy in Asheville, which was very helpful, but it's not something that's necessary in order to implement a community-based product development strategy at your organization. You just need to have those three elements I talked about: the need, the funding, and the ability to execute, and then find a strategy that works and apply that strategy to the need in your community and raise funds around it. So, we assessed the need in the Chattahoochee Valley and it was there. We assessed the ability to raise those funds and we were successful in that early on. And we knew that we had the strength of staff and the strategic ability and the board of directors that we needed to have in place to be able to implement the strategy. So that's basically product development in a nutshell. And you really need to be able to sustain those strategies as well. And I'm going to let Jennifer in a minute here talk about the sustaining part of the strategy, the ability to raise annual gifts, and those types of things. But I want to touch on major and planned giving before I do that, because you can develop a suite of products and you may even have some initial investment there, but you're going to, if it's a community-based product that is large in scope, and they don't all have to be, they can be smaller strategies, but if it's big in scope, like the community school strategy, you're going to have a steady stream of major donations in order to sustain the strategy and to live up to the promises that you've made along the way to all of your stakeholders that are involved. So with community schools, we did have existing stakeholders and a new investor. But in order to sustain, we're going to need more major gifts along the way. I know that our our vice president of philanthropy is on here, so I'm sure she's listening, and she's putting a lot of effort into that. Chandra Wright, at our fabulous VP of philanthropy at our United Way. So lots of elements there, but there are 5 main things that you need to do throughout the major gifts process. You need to ID those prospects, right? And you need to make the most of your database in doing that. Your best prospects are already in your database. You may be able to leverage them to find other prospects. That's part of the IDing process as well. Qualification, that's a step that's probably the most skipped and least understood, but it's very, very important because you don't want to ask for $100,000 from a $10,000 donor, and more perilous, you don't want to ask for $10,000 from a $100,000 donor. So do some background work on net worth, previous giving history, whether that's through wealth screening or just, more information is going to be gained from interviewing associates and friends of your target. So do that qualification work so you know what to ask for. Cultivation, that's really the key to this. That's a process by which you engage, and it can take a few weeks to a few months to a few years. And in today's environment, I would say a few years is probably too long. That's past kind of the average tenure of your average development officer. So you want to close the loop in 18 months or less. There are only so many hours in the day, and you likely, or hopefully you have a lot of prospects that you're working, but you need to use a systematic approach, which will allow you to create a pipeline of major donors that you're going to be able to put into those product developments and show a lot of value back to them and keep the money coming to fuel all this amazing work that you're doing. And then of course the solicitation. I like to have something in hand when I go to a donor that clearly states what you're asking for, perhaps even a gift agreement, but all of that's you decide based on what donor you're engaging, what the forum is, the history with that donor. But it's important to make a solid ask for a specific amount. And then once the gift is in, you need to steward that gift to keep that door open for future gifts. So as usually the case, I'm going to hit planned giving really quickly. As usually the case, planned giving is left for last. And that's because you just don't have time, and I'm running out of time to touch on planned giving. But I'll just say, be Johnny Appleseed. Plant a tree under the shade of which you will never sit. That's incredibly important. That's really the key to planned giving, and you have to embed it in all of your materials, talk about it all the time. Only 1 in 3 planned gifts to your organization are currently discovered. So through the process of cultivating, you will uncover expectancies that were previously unknown. And once again, your prospects for planned giving are in your database, and don't overlook those $200 to $300 donors that have been given to you for 20 years in favor of going after, a $10,000 donor that's maybe given to you once or twice, because the data shows that those $200 or $300 a year donors that are given to you every year are as good or better planned giving prospects than your major donors who maybe haven't been given to you for as long. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jennifer, and I thank you for the opportunity to be here.
All right, thanks, Ben, and thank you to the Cary Center for the invitation to help with this workshop. As a point of administration for a moment, Kim, let me ask you, are you going to be monitoring slides and moving them forward, or would you like for me to do that?
I can do it if you will give me a heads up when you're ready for me to move them.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Well, so my name is Jennifer, and I have been, I think probably just like many of you, just in the role of development director for many, many years, starting in a small nonprofit and then growing that small nonprofit. And now the agency that I'm with is much, much larger. But over the course of my career in nonprofit development, I feel like I have had an inside glimpse on how to even just kind of birth a development department and then help it to grow. And I think I've seen and experienced, like many of you probably have, what it feels like to wear many hats and to almost be doing a situation of trial and error where we're trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work, and finding our sweet spot in development with limited resources and with limited time. And so if you identify with that, then this little next time is for you. And I'll tell you that when I've gone to conferences over the years, I have always felt like attending them just is a good opportunity to get some fresh wind in my sails and to catch some new ideas. And, you know, you leave with just a few nuggets that give you some fresh energy to implement something new in your agency. So what I would like to talk about in my little time here is the power of monthly giving, because it's one of those areas of development that I have found to be extremely powerful in growing and sustaining a nonprofit organization. So there are many types of gifts that you can solicit, from event fundraising to grants, single donations, major gifts. They're all critically important, and they play an important role in the fundraising success of a nonprofit. But I've found that the monthly gift has power to change the way that you fundraise. And so why is that? I think it's because recurring donors give more and they stay more loyal over time. So that means that over time you build a strong base of operating sustainability. And what that does for you in your fundraising process is it frees you up to fundraise not just for paying the bills, but for growth. And that's how this changes your fundraising process. So in my background, I started at a small nonprofit that actually did not have a fundraising process. They had been open for many, many years, but had been sustained only by a small number of supporters. And then when they decided to start fundraising, they brought me on board to do that process. And in those early years, we learned a lot. We learned what worked and what didn't work. And after a few years, we began to implement a monthly giving program where we were inviting donors to engage on a monthly basis. And some of you might identify with this. We didn't have the right tools in place. We didn't know what automated giving was then. So we were in those early stages sending pledge reminders and getting checks in the mail. It was not automated. But over time, we began to build the right tools in place. And what happened was we went from having no monthly donors to, over the course of probably 8 to 10 years, we were able to grow that program until we had 130 donors committed to giving monthly on an automated basis for the most part. And so just imagine what that could do for your nonprofit if you know what income you're counting on each month and you can plan accordingly with your budget. The impact of 130 or more donors each month sending in their donations, it really makes a difference in how you can plan and how you fundraise in the future. So let's talk about a few terms first. When I talk about recurring monthly giving, some people are familiar with like a monthly pledge terminology, and the difference between a pledge and what we're going to talk about today is a pledge has a finite total. It's broken down by how much they'll give and how much is owed, and it's usually recorded as revenue at the time that the pledge is made as an accounts receivable. But what we're talking about today, instead of a pledge, is more a gift that's a recurring gift that they're committing to. And it doesn't have a finite total. It's just that they're saying we're going to give this much each month, and there's no end date. There's no expiration date to it. So that revenue is counted once it's received. And then let's look at a few things. You can switch the, you can, there we go. In terms of who is giving in monthly giving, I kind of looked at what across the landscape of givers, is it just young people? Is it older people? Who are those that are participating in monthly giving. And you can see from this slide that really all generations are giving. Those that are in the millennial age category all the way up through the baby boomers, they're all participating in this process. There are a couple of things that are different in each generation. For instance, millennials might be giving at a lower price point. They have a lower point of entry that makes them feel more comfortable. Baby boomers, they have given on a monthly basis in the past, but typically it has been through something like a direct mail appeal. And now in more recent years, they are also becoming comfortable with the idea of digital giving or automatic giving. And so that's the way increasingly that they're also engaging with monthly giving. And then also still in that bird's eye view, we know that there are certain goals that we each have as a nonprofit organization working on development. We know that we need a way to build ongoing long-term connections with our donors. So we know that it's easier to keep a donor than to find a new one. So if someone is giving, we want them to continue to give. We want to stay engaged and connected with that donor. And so monthly giving gives us a way to do that. We also know that we need predictable income for sustainability. And like I mentioned earlier, whenever you know that there's revenue in place for your monthly expenses, then it changes your messaging when you're fundraising. So rather than saying, would you please help us to sustain our operations, we have that in place when we have sustained giving through monthly recurring giving, and we can kind of look over the horizon a little bit more into the future, and we can begin to dream about how we can grow as an agency because we know that our monthly operations are already covered through monthly giving. Of course, as a nonprofit, we also are always watching those things such as our administrative costs, how much we're spending on postage, how much time we're spending on those things as well. And of course, we want to be environmentally friendly. And so we'll talk about the ways that monthly recurring giving helps us in those categories as well. And then ultimately, we know that both we and our donors would much prefer to spend our time talking about the mission and talking about the ways that their investments are making a difference in the lives of real people. We don't want to talk about the administrative side of things as much. We don't want to talk about our need constantly. We and our donors get excited when we can talk about what their impact is in the mission. All right, and then you can go to the next. So let's talk about the needs of the donor then. So for our donors, we need to make sure that we're meeting their needs as well. And then for cause-driven millennials, one of the things that they're looking for is they're very passionate. They want to be involved. They love to volunteer. They may not have as much disposable income at that stage of life yet, but they are looking for a point of entry into philanthropy. So monthly giving gives a lower price point, a lower point of entry for a donor to jump into support of the mission that they believe in. Whenever they spread out their gifts over many months, it feels easier. And actually it leads to more money in the long term, but somehow it's less painful. They want to be a part of something special and exclusive, and it's got to be convenient and easy. Giving needs to be convenient and easy for the donor. And I have a term that maybe you've heard before, but this is something that I love. It's a new term called subscription philanthropy. So if you stop and think about the way that I know for me that I live my life, I am one of many who has an Amazon Prime subscription. I have a Netflix subscription. I have a Spotify subscription. And so the idea behind subscription philanthropy is that we are incorporating not only our other consumable items into our monthly budget, but we're also choosing to budget in our philanthropy. So we're subscribing, and that's what monthly giving can provide for a donor. So the corporate world, thankfully, with their deeper pockets, oftentimes does our research for us, and they have, I think it's a good idea to follow their model and to look at what we can learn from them as they are growing themselves, and they have found that people are more likely, for instance, to pay $12.99 a month for an Amazon Prime membership. They're more likely to do that than they are to just drop $99 a year on it. And so as a nonprofit, I have something I can learn from that. It's something that we can apply to our appeals to donors. They like for their giving to be a little bit less painful, and in doing so, they give more. All right. And then donors, this isn't obvious, so I'm pausing here, but donors need us to ask. Sometimes we get so deep into our day and into what we're doing that we forget that just asking is important. So don't be scared to ask. I've heard many other people touch on that already this morning in the first workshop. And as Ben talked, we just need to ask. We need to not be scared to ask. And if we ask once and it's a no, then don't be afraid to ask again in the future when the time is right, or give them a different way that they can enter into the mission. But don't forget to ask. And then the last thing is donors want to hear updates about the mission. So monthly giving, once they're on board and they are giving on a monthly basis, we're not having to communicate with them to ask as much, and it frees us up to tell them more about the mission, and it frees them up to hear what they really care about, which is the impact that they're making. So let's talk about what the benefits are of monthly giving. Donors can sign up once and it's automatic. So do you remember me saying earlier that whenever we first started monthly giving at the nonprofit that I started my career at, I guess it was in the good old days. We didn't have automatic monthly giving set up then. Our budget didn't allow for that back then. And thankfully those things have become more affordable now, and people are also more comfortable with automatic giving at this point. But back in the day, we were sending out reminders and getting checks in the mail, and it wasn't nearly as easy as it is now. But now what I would encourage you to do is try to set up a monthly giving program where it's automatic. It only takes one sign up, and then they don't have to think about it, and you don't have to think about retrieving those dollars every month. It's very easy. There's many systems that will allow you, once that transaction happens automatically, it can also be posted automatically to their donor file. A receipt can be generated automatically, and that saves you time. And again, it saves money and it saves hassle, which is really beneficial. So monthly giving also engages younger donors. Again, we talked about that lower price point that gives them an easy point of entry. But also I put younger in quotes because I want to talk for a minute about what younger means. Many times nonprofits are sustained and carried by the older generation of donors who are able to give larger dollars. But sometimes that's people that are in their 80s or older. So I want us to think in terms of younger donors being people in their 40s and 50s. And for donors in their 40s and 50s, what the statistics shows that you can expect 25 to 50% of them to give subsequent gifts. So whereas those younger folks, the millennials, they may give, but they do have lower retention rates. They're not necessarily as likely to give again. Typically fewer than 10% of the younger generation give to an organization a second time. That retention rate increases whenever you're looking at people in the 40 and 50 age group. And so I want to consider that we should call those younger donors as well. And then it provides, have you ever had an event where someone has spent a lot of money for a ticket and then they feel like they've done their job and they don't give anymore at the event that night? That's sort of a pet peeve of mine because we've lost the opportunity to continue cultivating them. We might not hear from them again until the next event when they buy another ticket. So I would like to encourage us to think in terms of giving an appeal at your events that they join a monthly giving club. And it can only take $10 a month, and then they're continuing to be connected to your agency rather than them maybe buying a silent auction item for $25 and feeling like they've done their part, but has that actually helped us to continue and grow that relationship that we started at the event? So this is one of the reasons I love monthly giving. Okay, I'm looking to see, because I'm watching the time too. I want to make sure that we're conscious of our time. Let's talk about how monthly giving creates retention. One of the things that I love about it is that if you set it up correctly, you are not saying, please be a monthly donor for a year. What you're saying is, please be a monthly donor. And they are free to contact you at any point to cancel it. And you can do that right away that same day, but we want to put the onus on the donor to stop giving rather than putting the onus on the donor to sign up each year to continue giving. So let me encourage you not to put an expiration date on a recurring monthly gift, because that's one of those things I learned early on. It creates a lot of extra work for you and they don't necessarily sign up again. But if they have to take an action to cancel it, they're much more likely to continue to give, and it becomes a part of their habit each month. Let's continue to the next slide. So this is an interesting graphic I wanted to share with you, and it's about donor retention. So whenever statistics show us that when someone gives through monthly giving, they're more likely to stay engaged and involved with your nonprofit. And so what this graphic is showing us is that the average donor retention rate is 46%, but the average donor retention rate for someone who's only given one gift is only 23%. The retention rate if someone's given more than one gift is 60%, but if they have signed up to be a monthly donor, the retention rate goes to up to 90%. So you can tell whenever we're putting the work into finding our donors and engaging them, we want to keep them. We don't want to have to be finding new donors every year, because that's not effective or efficient. So we want to keep our donors engaged. And the best way statistics show to do that is to encourage them to connect with us on a monthly basis. I would encourage you too to check out your own retention rates. If you haven't taken a look at that, a lot of donor databases will give you a tool that can generate that statistic for you, but that's kind of your homework assignment, is to go and take a look at what your retention rate is. And that might give you some guidelines for what you want to do next in order to build your own retention rate and increase it. So a effective monthly giving program, as I mentioned, it's open-ended. We don't want to put an expiration date on someone's gift. I would encourage you to tie it to something that's tangible that they're providing. So in other words, don't ask them to pay their rent on a space. Ask them instead to provide a space for teenagers to learn independent living skills, or something tangible rather than something that's, not going to touch them in their heart. Give your program a name. So these are a few of them that have been successful for others. You might call it a circle, or sustainers, or partners, advocates. And then where do you find new monthly donors? The first place you should look is who has given you a first-time gift. If they've given you a first-time gift, go ahead and connect with them and ask them and invite them to be a part of your monthly giving program. And then I'm buzzing through because I'm watching the time. And let me know, Kim or Sid, if we have questions. This is a slide, and we'll provide our slides after this, but there are some tools that I have listed that you can take a look at later, for good tools that you can use to begin a monthly giving program, and some tips for kind of how to get started with that. And then there's also on this slide that you can check out later a few examples of good monthly giving programs, but what they do in essence is they encourage people to consider a monthly gift first. So your first ask can be, connect with us monthly. And then if they're not ready to connect monthly, then they can still have the option of a one-time gift. But I would encourage you to lead with that ask for a monthly gift.
Hey, Jennifer, we do have a couple of questions in the chat, and we're right there on that cusp of time.
Okay.
So, pardon my interruption, but Michael has asked, what software for sign-up, acknowledgement, and tracking is recommended? And then we had another question. Do you have a minimum dollar threshold in mind that would qualify for a monthly payment option? So
Okay.
2 quick questions, and
So
we're sitting on about 1 to 2 minutes. So
yes, there's a list on the PowerPoint slides that you can access later. So, but Donor Perfect is what we use currently. There's Bloomerang, Salesforce, and as far as and there's others as well. I have read and found that the minimum that you would want to ask for a monthly gift, you can go as low as $5, $10. Give them an easy point of entry because you can always upgrade them later. And if they show loyalty, then they're likely to upgrade later if you're doing your job to communicate what their impact is.
okay, I'm checking the chat one more for any additional questions, comments. Hey, this was great, Jennifer and Ben. Thank you so very much for sharing your expertise and